Any news?
No.
No.
Yeah, we had a few eager beavers at 4:30.
No news is good news.
Yeah, we had 3 people thought they were going to meditate at 4:30. Other than that, it's been all quiet.
Eager beavers.
Yeah.
An eager beaver.
Okay. But I bet we have some people coming on now, right? At 5 till. There's some people showing up on the chat.
Flying there. It's a little flying there. Well, good evening, one and all from near and far, every galaxy, all those others that are here watching over, wanting to learn how to meditate from afar. you came to the right place. Because we're going to talk about the mystery of the star tetrahedron and how it is part of the origin of creation and why it's such an important tool for our evolution and the evolution of the planet, particularly as the planet is going through such a difficult time right now. And the breaking down of the old paradigm, we can see it rapidly happening. It's very somewhat tragic and horrendous, to say the least. Unfortunately, it's like fertilizer, when it finally is destroyed, and all of those who unfortunately suffered in the destructuring, it simply creates fodder for the new beginning, the growth. And that is really, we're at the beginning of that. So what do we do? Do we harden ourselves to what's going on? No, we want to really open our hearts ever more and have compassion and love, which I know we all do here on the live stream tonight and in this room. At the same time, we also need to realize that as these things are arising forth, it's going to bring forth emotion. And we then want to look at that emotion. We don't want to push it aside nor dislike it, but be aware of it and realize it's a proper response. But again, don't own it. Don't get lost within it. Because in one way, if you will, it's a perception. So let me give you a little understanding of that. When you go to the movie and there's something really horrendous happening on the movie screen, and your whole emotional set is now being riled and roiled, and there's a sense of worry about the characters, and there's a sense of anger at some of the other that play the part of the villain. But in a way, you see, what you're seeing is just a perception. Your emotion is just a perception of what you're viewing. And that's the key word, perception. So we see these things happening within the world, and our perception says this is tragic, which it is. But if we're bringing forth emotion around it of our own sadness or loneliness or fear or worry, that's a perception that we're creating because of what we're observing. If we simply observe what is happening within the world, and then with compassion, we send lots of love and light. We bring forth the angels to guide those and to assist those, both those who are leaving the earthly plane and for those who are left to mourn. We send angels. And so we're using our compassion, because if we get lost in the emotion, and once again, that's a perception, we perceive that it's a tragedy. But if it brings up sadness and fear, then we're lost in that. We're not able to stand firm, you see, in the forces that are coming at us, and then simply let them go by us. We perceive that that is tragic, but at the same time, we open our heart. We bring forth the Christ field energy in and through us, and we allow the living waters that can flow so dynamically from us to flow out, and that's the change that's going to bring forth the new paradigm. And so we're not being, if you will, frustrated and angry. We perceive that, yes, that's tragic, but at the same time, if we're bringing forth frustration and anger, we might think it's a righteous, feeling, but at the same time, it's then that energy is projecting out from us. And so we have to be very observant in this time of the great change upon the planet to hold compassion and love for everyone, for the victims, for the evildoers, for all of them. Because when we get down to the real finality that we have so talked about together in creation, that everything is but source. It is but source putting on an energy wave to play a part, to learn and to grow. And we may not understand in this moment what individuals are learning and what they are seeking to find within this very tragic. But each of us, you see, is trying to understand something about life, about ourselves. It's more poignant for those who are intimately involved in the situation. But it's our compassion and our love, you see, that comes from us that is now beginning to vibrate out and creates a new frequency. And it's through that new frequency of love and light and compassion that those things won't be possible in the future. We can legislate till the cows come home, put people in jail and put them in institutions and take away, their rights. But at the same time, they're simply going to circumvent those rights. They're going to circumvent what we try and put them into in the jails or in the institutions because they want to live. They just don't know how to live righteously. And so if we then come to a place of putting in together institutions that to give people the ability to change, to really grow, to really unfold, and it starts in earliest childhood. Really, that's the beginning. We know that from that conception to 7 years of age, that's the time frame when all these things are really set in place. So we see the adults maybe acting, heinously, but at the same time, it's their upbringing from that conception to 7 years of age that has already been impregnated into them. And they become loners, they become removed from society. And that's just, again, a byproduct of what happened at a very early age. But when we're creating now new institutions in the future of really bringing forth within the children the understanding of really love and wisdom and caring, because that's the emanation that's coming from us, it then begins to foster a whole new wave of evolution on the planet. So that's really why we're here at this particular time to bring the sense of compassion in the midst of great change. We also want to talk a little bit about creation tonight, the origin of creation. We talked about together several times that if you can imagine a totally dark room and you are now in that room, and whatever you have learned and whatever you have created within this lifetime, it's within your mind, it's in your feeling, it's in your consciousness. But there's nothing that reflects that in the room because it's totally dark and there's nothing within it. But still, all of that is still within consciousness, but there's no form. Well, this is the image of the void. It's the image of Source before creation ever began. Source, in its infinite consciousness, had dreamt and imagined creation in its infinite possibilities. Infinite possibilities. But there was no manifestation. There was simply this great consciousness of the infinite, the void, dreaming and imagining and dreaming every possible scenario and every possible outcome and the planets and all creation, but no form. And so after that, that infinite dreaming finally came to somewhat, we might say, a close. Infinite consciousness asked itself, what am I? And in that moment of asking that, there was a reflection of light back to this infinite consciousness. And now consciousness had light. And that light is what we call the Christ light, the Christ mind. And it is then the Christ mind that was then able to peer into the void. And it could then imagine all those things that Source had dreamt, all those things that Source had imagined in all those eons and eons of infinite creation within the darkness. And as it illuminated each one, then Source began to manifest itself into creation. And in the beginning, it was, of course, very rudimentary. Just as we in our genome, we really began from amoebas. Of course, that was probably several billion years ago, but it is the amoeba as it evolved and grew in its genome that finally evolved to then be the human being that we are. And so it's the same with Source in creation. When the Christ mind began to illuminate Source, it was at the first very rudimentary things that were created. But over time, as the Christ mind began to be more adept at forming and formulating and bringing light into more if you will, focus, it began then to expand the possibilities. It began to expand the intricacy. And now you see we are the product of that expansion. But at the same time, you see, we are source. It is simply that which is the Christ mind, illuminating what was within source. And so you and I and all creation was once in source as a thought, but now we're within form. But we have forgot, you see, that we originated from source. Many of us, of course, are beginning to remember that and to understand it. But the beauty of this is with the star tetrahedron, as you then begin to balance the masculine of power and the feminine of love and bring them into perfect harmony within you, and the star tetrahedron begins to open within the heart chakra, you begin to literally be able to peer back into the void. And then you can know and see and feel then the thoughts, the images, the imagination of source, which is what you are within the void. You've just come out into form. And so as we are now out within form, we are expanding the Christ mind. In the beginning, the Christ mind was rudimentary. It was, again, very simplistic, just as we once were the amoeba, very simplistic. But the amoeba began to evolve, and as it evolved, it gained information and understanding and began to, through the environment, begin to adapt to new personalities. Well, that's the story of really creation. But the creations began to reach somewhat of its culmination and its climax. And now that we, as then the Christ within form, when we awaken, we then can be literally informed, peer back into the void, summon from out of the void that which we would choose to illuminate. And so we expand the possibilities of source, God, creation, living within form, which will create a whole nother wave of evolution. Something that's never really been seen in the universe, that a human, something totally informed, could be so illuminated and at one with source, it could know the mind of God, know the mind, the will of the one being, and then simply call it forth into creation. And so can you imagine, you see, if you, as a person living in this dark room that we talked about in the beginning, that all the things you could ever imagine and all the possibilities you could ever think of, you now have the opportunity to call them forth into creation because you have the tools, you have the wisdom, you have the understanding. And so this is why this is so very important, you see, as we go forth into the future, because we are here to now create the future by, I guess, observing what's going on and the tragedy and the difficulties of so many individuals in the world as they somewhat fall into the darkness. But we're here to simply observe it and know that people are learning something, they're growing. As I look back on my life and all the tragedy that's ever happened, I always grew from it, always gathered some great information, some great understanding. And as I then grew and unfolded, it then brought me to the place of then peace and quietness and then harmony within. And the star tetrahedron opens and one becomes then a creator being. So it all serves a purpose. But when we look at one small block of time, like a tragedy that we're observing today, we think, well, this is absolutely horrendous and terrible, and something's, terribly wrong with creation. But if we're able to look at it in the future and see, well, who evolved and who learned and what did they become, you would find that everything then grows and unfolds and flowers into something more beautiful and profound. It grew from out of tragedy into then the fullness of grace and glory. That's just the way life is on the planet. And so once again, if we observe it, yes, we observe it and we see what it is, but at the same time, we don't get caught in the emotionality of it. So I sure invite any questions or feelings you might have about that. We can dialogue more together on it. So one of the things, of course, that we know that it's from the open doorway where we are then summoning source into creation. There are three aspects, you see, to source creation. There's one, the image, and it is the Christ mind, the consciousness that illuminates that image. And as it is illuminated, the star tetrahedron then holographically creates it into form. But it's a lifeless form until spirit is imbued into it. And so there is spirit, there is consciousness, and there is imagination. That's just what creates form, the bodies of God now made manifest. And so it's from the open door where you see where we then not only peer into the void and we illuminate our choices of creation, but then equally important with breath, we're then bringing spirit to imbue it with life. And so then we become really creator beings. So the breath work that we do is really a very important part of that. As you're doing your meditation, it's very important, you see, to feel that as the in breath is now breathing in, you're really calling this living stream of life in and through you. As I'm breathing in my meditation, I'm seeing this golden, living, liquid stream just flow out from me. It flows all around, up, just like the sun. It just flows like a living stream from my heart. It's very quiet, it's very peaceful, and because all life is imbued within that golden frequency, it is the Christ wave, the Christ field, as it's simply my meditation is moving from me, as it is in your meditation. It's creating a new world, a new trajectory of humanity to step into, moving away from the old paradigm of tragedy. So a very important part of our work is the breath work. So we're going to do the breath work for about 5 minutes. And as we're breathing, we want to have the spine nice and erect, because if you can imagine the star tetrahedron, as it is then turning, of course, it is then moving around the outer periphery of the body, but it's from the point above, which is masculine spirit, to that which is beneath, mother grounded form, that there is a rod of energy that goes through it. Well, that's the spinal column. And you see, as the spinal column was first developing, we worked with the first chakra of fear and survival, the second chakra of emotion and feeling. And as we balanced them, then the energy began to be flowing much more easily up and down the spine. And then finally, we begin to achieve true balance in all chakras. And then they are simply culminated into the heart chakra, where all that is of form and all that is of spirit and all that is of love and all that is of power, it is now brought back together. And of course, this is the symbol of the cross. The right is the masculine of power, the left the feminine of feeling. Up is spirit, below is grounded Mother Earth, and where all of those come together, you see, is the heart chakra. And when all those qualities are balanced within you, you are then giving yourself permission to open the doorway once again back into the realms of infinite spirit, because you can then be trusted with all the powers of creation. So let's go ahead and do some very deep, slow, and focused breath work, really watching and feeling this living stream arising forth from out of the heart. It is the imagination that makes the unreal real. What I imagine and focus light attention upon becomes real. I am summoning a living golden stream of Christ field energy from my heart, from the infinite God I am. And another slow, deep, deep calling of spirit breath from the open doorway. One of the reasons that the feeling of this living stream coming from the heart is so important is because you, as you are imagining it and feeling it, it's then flowing through every cell and tissue, every part of the physical form and changing it. We know that this is the new science of epigenetics, that we have thought before that life only adapted through the genes in the body, the DNA, that they only adapted to the outer environment, and that was evolution. Well, it was until we became then highly conscious individuals. And as highly conscious individuals, we can now imagine and feel, and they have found in actually scientific studies that the brain cannot tell the difference between a highly imagined feeling and an actual feeling that's experienced in the world. And so, as you imagine and feel with clarity and precision, this is the new epigenetic, see, focus that we're creating of changing the body from inside out. And so we're actually changing the structure of the physical form by no longer adapting to the environment, but by literally our imagination of what will I call myself into being? What am I? What do I choose that I am by simply focusing upon it? And you see, if we're focusing upon things that are out of balance and things that are difficult, then that's part of the epigenetic energy that's flowing through the body. And so that's why when we see these things that are just tragic, we want to observe them, but at the same time to be aware of the emotion, that we don't get lost within it, because that vibration will then work upon the body. We observe and bring compassion, love, knowing that angels and spirit and life is in architecting something that will be very profound when we finally see the outcome in the future. What that is, we don't know right now because we only see a very small part of the movie. So we trust, and we trust in spirit. So, of course, when we do the star tetrahedron meditation, as we talked about last week, I was watching how people were getting a little too involved in really observing and feeling the star tetrahedron too much. So we want to go ahead and, as we begin, observe it and feel it and know that it's there, know it's moving around and through. And as it's then moving, the balance of masculine power, feminine love, it's opening this doorway in the heart. So this is the important part. And as the doorway opens, we then feel and we observe this living spring being summoned and called forth. We know that it's touching the facets of this prismatic star, the Christ field, and it's then sending out vital, radiant waves of living light from us. So again, you're breathing in spirit, imbuing the light that is flowing from you with life, flows out into the world, and we then create a new world becoming. So I'll go ahead and take you through the full formulation of the star tetrahedron, and we'll meditate for about 30-40 minutes. Again, being aware, please, of breath, summoning spirit from the heart, imbuing the golden light with life. So let's go ahead and close the eyes and feel the body relaxing. We can be aware of our breath and the silence it brings. If we feel any tension, we realize it's simply a perception in consciousness. The brain is perceiving it, but from the level of mind, higher consciousness, it's an illusion. So we perceive and then we simply let go and come to higher mind. Source, God I am. And we bring our attention between the eyebrows and we draw a line straight back. And in the approximate center point of the head, we ignite with our imagination the light of the soul, the Christ light. Our imagination increases, filling the mind and the brain with living light. Light I am. We bring our attention to the heart chakra at the sternum, and we illuminate what already exists, the star tetrahedron. It has simply been covered over and clouded with the ignorance of life on the planet up until now. But the Christ only exists within all creation. It is the origin. From the very beginning, the Christ field, all life is the I am. And as the star tetrahedron is turning, we feel in the very center of the chest, the heart chakra, the open doorway. And the living waters are flowing forth. The breath of life, spirit, gives life. And light life and radiance flows from us. Let's sit quietly together, and I will join you, and we'll all gather together in the living light I am. Quite beautiful. Thank you very much. As we were talking earlier about the things that are going on in the world, it doesn't mean that we don't take action or that we don't um, do what we're called to do in those situations. But at the same time, if we're doing it with compassion and with a feeling of emanating love, because it's just ignorance that is arising forth, and if we're coming forth with anger and hatred and frustration, that goes before us and then is once again part of the problem that we're seeing. And so we take dynamic action and we do what we're called to do to address these different things, be it talking to our senators or talking to officials, whatever we might be called to do. But if we do it from a place of love and compassion, we're bringing in the Christ field to really bring another level of understanding and wisdom. And we're not emanating again the energy of frustration and anger that's part of the issue that's going on in the world today. So we observe what's taking place and we, again, understand the emotion may be arising forth, but then to dismiss it and go then to compassion. So I want to thank you for being with us tonight. My book, Source Dialogues, a very clear and powerful dissertation on not only enlightenment, but actually ascension. Ascension is not leaving the planet. Ascension is creating the light embodied so that the Christ field becomes informed within and through you. So there's a full and clear understanding within it. It's very complex in many ways because there's a tremendous amount of understanding in the book to weave you from the level of, if you will, beginning meditation to actual light embodiment. But I encourage you to study it and to be with it, and you'll find it's a marvelous understanding for light embodied ascension. We'll see you again in 2 weeks, emanating much peace, goodwill, and joy. Joy is the nature of the soul, and whenever you can find joy in your life, joy whatever you're doing, you're bringing life and joy to the world, even in the midst of tragedy. All right, my friends, thank you once again, and we'll see you very soon, and take care.